What happens when the creature everyone calls broken teaches you how to be whole? It was October, always October, when the big shift happened, Sarah thought. The air in her small apartment carried that first, unmistakable bite of winter, creeping in, not freezing, not yet, but a sharpness that made you pull your sweater sleeves down over your knuckles. Outside, the last stubborn leaves, mostly brown and brittle now, scraped across the pavement in the wind, a lonely, whispering sound. The sky was the color of old dish water, flat, heavy. It pressed down on the city, on the rooftops, on Sarah's chest. She sat on the edge of her worn sofa, a lukewarm mug of tea forgotten on the coffee table beside a stack of unopened mail. Bills, probably. Condolence cards she still couldn't bring herself to read. 2 months, 61 days since the call that shattered her world. Her father, gone suddenly. A heart attack in his sleep, no warning, just silence where his voice used to be. The apartment felt cavernous now, echoing with the absence of his weekly phone calls, his booming laugh that used to fill the space even over the line. She'd moved in here after the divorce, a fresh start that now felt like a desolate outpost. Grief wasn't a wave, it was the air she breathed. Thick, suffocating, constant. She felt untethered, adrift in her own life. The vibrant colors of her paintings, stacked against the wall, seemed muted, irrelevant. What was the point of capturing light when everything felt so dark? You're here, listening, and that means more than you know if you feel safe in these stories. Your one subscribe helps me keep this quiet little corner alive. Thank you for being part of this peaceful world. And then there was the rustling. It came from the spare room, the room she'd been using to store boxes she hadn't unpacked in 2 years. A soft thump followed by a dragging sound. Then silence. Sarah held her breath. The old building creaked, but this was different, sharper, more deliberate. Her first instinct, honed by city living and recent vulnerability, was fear. A cold prickle ran down her spine. She stood slowly, silently, and padded towards the closed door. Her hand hovered over the knob. What if it's a rat? Or worse, the irrational thoughts crowded in. Grief did that, made the shadows deeper, the sounds more ominous. She took a shaky breath and pushed the door open. The room was dim, lit only by the gray light filtering through the dusty window. Cardboard boxes formed shadowy towers, and there, in the narrow space between a box labeled Mom's China, fragile and the wall, was the source of the sound. A cat, not just any cat. A small, scruffy ginger tabby, maybe a year old, with wide, startled eyes the color of tarnished pennies. It froze the moment the light hit it, pressing its body flat against the floorboards. But it wasn't crouching to pounce. It was hiding. Sarah's gaze traveled down its tense body. Its front half was poised, muscles coiled, but its hind quarters, they weren't there. Not entirely. Where the strong back legs should have propelled it, there was nothing. Just a smooth curve of furred skin ending abruptly mid-flank. The cat wasn't crouching, it was lying completely flat, its entire back end immobile. Sarah's breath caught. She'd never seen anything like it. How had it even gotten in here? The window was shut tight. The fire escape outside, 3 stories up, impossible. The cat stared at her, unblinking. Its ears were flat against its skull, not in aggression, but in sheer, paralyzing terror. A low, thrumming growl vibrated in its tiny chest, more a tremor of fear than a warning. It was painfully thin. Ribs showed starkly beneath its dull coat. Patches of fur were missing near its tailless rear, revealing pink, slightly raw-looking skin. It looked wrecked, abandoned, utterly defeated. Yet, in those wide, copper eyes, Sarah didn't just see fear. She saw a flicker of something else, a fierce, desperate will. A refusal to simply stop. Sarah knelt slowly, keeping a distance. "Hey there," she whispered, her voice rough from disuse. "Where did you come from, little warrior?" The cat flinched at the sound but didn't retreat further. There was nowhere to retreat. It just watched her, that low tremor continuing. Sarah noticed its front paws, disproportionately large and strong-looking for its frail body. They were splayed slightly, claws digging minutely into the wood grain. As if bracing for an impact that never came, she saw the faintest tremor in its whiskers. Exhaustion radiated from it. This wasn't just a stray. This was a survivor of something terrible. Memories flickered unwanted. Her father, stoic through his chemo, refusing help until the very end. The fierce independence that masked his own vulnerability. The way he'd look at her sometimes, a quiet pride mixed with a worrying he'd never voice. "Don't fuss, Sarah girl, I'm tougher than I look." This broken creature, lying flat and terrified on her dusty floor, echoed that same stubborn refusal to show weakness. It mirrored the isolation she felt, the feeling of being fundamentally altered, incomplete. A wave of profound sadness washed over her, but beneath it, something else stirred, a fierce, protective pang. A recognition. Okay, Sarah breathed, more to herself than the cat. Okay, just stay still. She backed out of the room slowly, leaving the door slightly ajar. In the kitchen, she found a small, shallow saucer and filled it with water. She rummaged in the fridge, half a tin of tuna left over from a sandwich attempt days ago. She mashed it onto a clean paper plate. Her hands trembled slightly. This felt monumental, ridiculous, maybe bringing food to a strange, disabled cat hiding in her junk room. Yet, it felt like the first purposeful thing she'd done in weeks. She placed the water and tuna just inside the doorway, then retreated to the living room, sitting on the floor where she could see the crack of the door. She waited, minutes stretched, silence, then the faintest shuffle. A cautious sniff, the sound of desperate, tiny laps at the water, the quiet, almost frantic munching of tuna. Sarah closed her eyes, leaning her head back against the sofa. The scraping of the leaves outside seemed quieter now. The heavy gray sky felt a fraction less oppressive. She didn't know it yet. Huddled on her living room floor, listening to a broken cat eat its first meal in who knew how long, but Sarah was about to witness something extraordinary. This fragile, two-legged creature who flinched at shadows and hid in terror, possessed a spirit that would soon defy every expectation. Doubters, including the voice of fear and grief inside Sarah herself, would whisper impossible. But Rocket, as she would soon name him, was about to teach them all about the breathtaking power of a leap taken against the odds. His journey wouldn't just be viral, it would become the lifeline she didn't know she needed, proving that sometimes the most profound strength comes on only two legs. The quiet in the apartment shifted. It was no longer just the silence of absence, it was the held breath before a beginning. The faint sounds from the spare room, the tiny, determined gulps of water, the scrape of a paper plate, were the first notes of a new, unexpected melody. Sarah felt a warmth spread through her chest, fragile but undeniable, a tiny crack. In the ice, she hadn't smiled in weeks, but sitting there, back against the sofa, listening to the unseen cat survive, the ghost of one touched her lips. Something important, something vital had just walked, or rather, dragged itself, into her broken world. The days that followed settled into a fragile, watchful rhythm. Sarah named him Rocket that first morning. It felt absurdly optimistic. For a creature who couldn't walk, let alone fly. But something about the fierce concentration in his eyes, the sheer effort radiating from his tiny frame as he dragged himself an inch across the floorboards. It spoke of an inner propulsion. A defiance, Rocket. It stuck. He didn't leave the spare room, not at first. Sarah kept the door ajar just enough for light and air, and for her to slip in food and water twice a day. She used shallow dishes. placed close to the shadowy corner behind the mom's china box that had become his fortress. She'd enter slowly, announcing herself in a soft murmur. "Hey, Rocket Man, just me, bringing breakfast." Her voice, unused to gentleness, felt rusty. He'd be there every time a small ginger smudge pressed deep into the gloom. Eyes wide, unblinking, tracking her every move. The paralyzing terror had lessened, replaced by a profound weariness. He wouldn't eat or drink until she was fully retreated to the living room, her back turned. Only then would she hear the tentative scrape of the paper plate, the quiet, desperate lapping. The sound of survival ... echoing in her too-quiet apartment. Sarah found herself drawn to the doorway, sitting cross-legged on the floor just outside, a book open but unread on her lap. She'd listen. Beyond the eating sounds, there were others. The soft dash of his belly fur dragging on the wood as he repositioned himself. An occasional, almost inaudible sigh, the rhythmic thrum of her own heartbeat, loud in the stillness, and sometimes ... a low, rumbling vibration. So faint she thought she imagined it at first, a purr. But it sounded broken, hesitant, like an engine struggling to turn over on a cold morning. Was it contentment with the food, or just the mechanics of his strange body? She wasn't sure. She started talking to him. Not expecting an answer, just filling the silence with something other than grief, she told him about the gray sky outside, about the grumpy old man who ran the bodega downstairs, about the stupidly cheerful song she'd heard on the radio that had somehow made her cry. She told him, haltingly, about her dad. The way he'd whistle off-key while fixing a leaky faucet, his terrible dad jokes. The way his hands, big and calloused, could be so incredibly gentle. The words spilled out, raw and unpolished, finding an audience in the dimness beyond the door. Rocket listened. She could feel it. His wide copper eyes would often be fixed on the slice of her visible from his hiding spot. Not blinking, just ... absorbing. One damp Tuesday afternoon, rain tapping insistently on the window, Sarah brought in the food as usual. Tuna again, mixed with a bit of warm water to make it easier. She placed it down, started her retreat. But this time, she paused halfway to the living room. She didn't turn her back. She sat down on the floor, right there in the threshold, leaning her shoulder against the doorframe. She kept her gaze slightly averted, looking down at her hands resting loosely in her lap. She stayed perfectly still, breathing slowly. Silence stretched, thick, tense. She could feel Rocket's stare like a physical touch. Minutes ticked by, marked only by the rain and the frantic hammering of her own heart. This is stupid. He's terrified. I'm scaring him. Just as she was about to give up, to retreat fully, she heard it, not the scrape of the plate, not the lapping, a different sound. Soft, deliberate. Scrape. Scrape. She dared the smallest glance from under her lashes. Rocket had emerged from behind the box, not far, just a few inches into the open space near his food. He wasn't dragging flat anymore. He'd hitched his body up, his powerful front legs taking his full weight, his chest lifted off the ground. His back end, that smooth, furred curve, rested on the floor. He looked ... taller, less like a creature flattened by the world. He was staring directly at her, his body rigid, poised for flight he couldn't achieve. But he held his ground. He didn't look at the food. He looked at her. Sarah held her breath. She didn't move a muscle. She offered the faintest whisper of a smile, barely a twitch of her lips. "It's okay, Rocket," she breathed, her voice barely audible above the rain. "Just me, just sitting." His gaze didn't waver. His ears, usually pinned back in apprehension, were swiveled slightly. Forward, curious, alert, she couldn't tell. Then, slowly, deliberately, he closed his eyes. Not a blink, a long, slow, deliberate closing. holding it for a second before opening them again. That deep, copper stare fixed back on hers. Sarah's breath caught. She knew that gesture, a slow blink, cat language for trust. "For I feel safe with you." A warmth, unexpected and fierce, bloomed in her chest, pushing against the ever-present ache of grief. It felt like the first tiny crack in a frozen lake. A silent communication in the dim, rainy light of a junk room. Tears pricked hot behind her eyes. She blinked them back, slowly, deliberately, mirroring him. "Okay," she whispered, her voice thick. "Okay." He didn't eat while she sat there. Not that time, but when she finally, reluctantly, retreated to the living room, the sounds of him eating were louder, less frantic, more purposeful. If this gentle story brought even a tiny smile or calm to your heart, would you consider subscribing? It helps me keep sharing these soft moments for you and for anyone who needs peace tonight. The bond, fragile as a spider web, began to strengthen. Sarah researched voraciously. She learned about cats with sacrocaudalogenesis, the condition likely causing Rocket's missing hindquarters. She learned about expressing his bladder, a necessary, initially terrifying intimacy she approached with clinical detachment that quickly melted into tenderness under his surprisingly calm acceptance. She bought special ointment for the raw patches near his rear, applying it with feather-light touches while murmuring nonsense reassurances. He'd tense initially, but never lash out. Just that watchful stare, gradually softening. She learned his sounds. The broken purr deepened, becoming a true, resonant rumble when she scratched behind his ears, a spot he seemed to discover he adored. A discovery marked by him leaning heavily into her hand, his eyes squeezing shut in bliss. A soft, chirping trill he'd make when she entered the room, a sound of greeting she'd never heard from a cat before. A low, disgruntled murrow if she was late with his food. His mobility evolved. The desperate belly drag became a more efficient, rhythmic scoot. He'd plant his strong front paws, lift his chest, and use his core muscles to bounce his smooth back. End forward a few inches. Thump scrape, thump scrape. It wasn't graceful, but it was determined. He started exploring beyond the immediate vicinity of his box fortress. Inch by cautious inch, he'd investigate the dusty corners of the room, sniffing cardboard, batting weakly at a stray piece of packing tape. His world was expanding, one determined thump scrape at a time. Sarah's world was changing too. The act of caring for him, measuring his food, cleaning his area, researching his needs, gave structure to her shapeless days. It was a task, a responsibility outside the crushing weight of her own sadness. She found herself talking to him more, not just from the doorway, but sitting on the floor inside the room, respecting his space but being present. She told him about her art block. The blank canvases that seemed to mock her, used to paint. Light rocket, she'd say, watching him intently sniff the leg of an old chair. Sunlight on water, dappled shadows on leaves. Now ... It all just looks gray. He'd pause in his exploration, glance at her, give a slow blink, then resume his scooting investigation. His quiet acceptance was a bomb. She started sketching. Again, not grand landscapes, just quick, rough pencil drawings in a cheap notebook. Rocket sleeping, curled into a tight ginger comma. Rocket mid-scoot, his front legs braced, his body taut with effort. The intense focus in his copper eyes, sketching him felt like relearning how to see. How to find beauty in resilience, in adaptation, in the sheer, stubborn will to exist. One evening, about 3 weeks after he dragged himself into her life, Sarah sat on the floor of the spare room, her back against a box labeled winter clothes. She was sketching Rocket as he meticulously cleaned his front paws, one after the other, his pink tongue rasping against the fur. The room was quiet, filled only with the soft sound of his grooming and the distant hum of the city outside. The air smelled faintly of dust, the tuna he'd eaten for dinner, and the clean, slightly medicinal scent of his ointment. She must have dozed off. The grief, the emotional weight of the last months, the strange new routine, it all caught up with her in the quiet dimness. Her head nodded forward, the sketchbook slipping from her lax fingers. She awoke with a start, disoriented. The room was darker. How long had she slept? She blinked, her eyes adjusting, and then she felt it. A warmth against her ankle. She looked down slowly, afraid to move. Rocket was there. Not touching her, not quite, but close. So close. He had scooted himself across the floor from his usual spot near the window. He lay on his side, parallel to her leg, his body curled slightly. His head was resting on the floor, but his eyes were open. Watching her, his nose was inches from her sock-covered ankle. His breathing was slow, steady, the faint rumble of a purr vibrated the air between them. He hadn't sought contact. Not yet, but he had chosen to be near, to sleep, vulnerable, within her reach. This creature who had hidden in terror, who had flinched at every sound, had crossed the expanse of the dusty floor to rest beside her. Not out of need for food or water, just proximity, companionship. Sarah didn't move, didn't dare breathe too deeply. The warmth of his small body radiated against her skin, a tangible, living heat cutting through the chill of the room and the lingering coldness inside her. The purr, that broken melody now steady and strong, resonated deep in her chest, sensing, with the slowing beat of her own heart, tears welled, silent and hot, spilling over and tracing warm paths down her cheeks. They were tears of fresh grief, not entirely. They were tears of a profound, disbelieving gratitude, a recognition of trust offered, fragile and immense. A connection forged not in grand gestures, but in tuna, slow blinks, ointment, and the quiet courage to scoot across a dusty floor towards another broken soul. She sat perfectly still, bathed in the dim light and the sound of his purring, feeling the tiny warmth against her ankle. The frozen lake inside her didn't just crack that night. A small, vital part of it melted. She wasn't alone in the dark anymore. Rocket was there, and he had chosen to stay. The journey, Sarah realized with a jolt of wonder mixed with apprehension, was just beginning. The doubters, the world's and her own, hadn't seen anything yet. Rocket was learning to move. What would happen when he learned to leap? The warmth of Rocket's chosen proximity lingered long after that night. It became a quiet ritual. Sarah would sit on the floor of the spare room, now less a storage dump and more Rocket's domain, boxes pushed aside to create a clear path for his determined scooting, reading, sketching, or simply breathing, and Rocket, more often than not, would eventually make his way over, not always touching, but close. His presence, the steady thrum of his purr, the soft scrape of his movement, became the new background music to Sarah's fractured life. The apartment no longer echoed solely with absence, it hummed with a small, fierce life. He grew stronger, noticeably. The raw patches healed under Sarah's diligent care, leaving smooth, healthy fur. His ginger coat grew glossier, his ribs less prominent. But the most astonishing transformation was in his mobility. The thump scrape evolved. He began using his powerful front legs not just to drag, but to propel. He'd plant his paws firmly, tense his core muscles Sarah hadn't even known a cat had in that configuration, and launch his back end forward with surprising force, landing with a soft thud a good 6 or 8 inches ahead. It was less a scoot, more a hop, a determined, two-legged hop. One crisp November morning, sunlight finally breaking through the persistent gray to paint stripes of gold on the dusty floorboards, Sarah witnessed the impossible. She was sitting cross-legged, sipping lukewarm coffee, watching Rocket investigate a sunbeam near the base of the old armchair she'd dragged in for herself. He seemed mesmerized by the dust motes dancing in the light. He hopped closer, his nose twitching. Then he looked up. Not at the dust, but at the seat of the armchair. It was a good foot and a half off the ground, an insurmountable cliff face. For a creature without hind legs, Sarah held her breath, a familiar knot of protective anxiety tightening in her chest. "Don't try it, little man. You'll hurt yourself." Rocket didn't hesitate. He backed up a few hops, his body coiling like a spring, his copper eyes fixed on the edge of the chair cushion. He took a breath Sarah could almost hear. Then, with a grunt of effort that was more vibration than sound, he sprang. It wasn't graceful. It was physics defying. His front legs propelled him upward and forward with explosive power, his streamlined back end following like the tail of a comet. For a heart-stopping second, he hung in the air, suspended. Then, his front paws hit the edge of the cushion. He scrabbled, claws finding purchase in the worn fabric. He heaved, his entire body a taut line of muscle and will. With one final, mighty pull, he dragged his smooth back end up and over, landing sprawled, panting, triumphant, in the middle of the sunbeam on the chair seat. Sarah gasped loudly. Coffee sloshed over the rim of her mug, burning her hand, but she barely noticed. She stared, wide-eyed, at the ginger cat blinking lazily in the sudden warmth, already starting to purr, utterly nonchalant about the feat he'd just performed. He'd jumped onto furniture with only 2 legs. A laugh bubbled up from somewhere deep inside her, raw and astonished, startling even herself. It echoed in the room, mingling with Rocket's purr. Rocket. She breathed, scrambling closer, kneeling beside the chair. You incredible creature, look at you." He merely stretched, arching his back luxuriously in the sunbeam, his purr deepening, as if to say, of course. What did you expect? That jump changed everything and nothing. For Sarah, it was a revelation. A burst of pure, unadulterated joy she hadn't felt since before her father died. It was hope solidified in fur and muscle and impossible determination. Rocket wasn't just surviving, he was living fiercely, adapting in ways that defied logic. Her protective anxiety began to soften, replaced by a dawning awe. If he could do that, what else was possible? Every new subscriber is like a warm cup of tea to my soul. It keeps this little channel going. If you felt something from this story, I'd love for you to stay, but the world outside the apartment, the world of practicality and expectation, hadn't witnessed Rocket's miracle. Sarah knew he needed a proper vet checkup, vaccinations, a professional assessment of his unique needs. The thought filled her with dread, the judgment, the pity. The inevitable questions. Should he even be alive? Is this kind? She found a vet clinic known for its work with special needs animals, her hands trembling as she made the appointment. The waiting room was bright, sterile, smelling of antiseptic and nervous animals. Rocket, nestled in a soft carrier Sarah had, lined with his favorite fleece blanket, was uncharacteristically silent. His wide copper eyes scanned the room, taking in the barking dog, the yowling kitten, the fluorescent lights. Sarah felt his tension radiating through the carrier walls. Or was it her own? Dr. Evans was kind, calm, efficient. Her eyes widened slightly when Sarah carefully lifted Rocket out and placed him on the stainless steel examination table. Rocket immediately tried to flatten himself, the instinct to hide overwhelming in this alien environment, but the smooth surface offered no purchase. He froze, trembling violently, his eyes darting around in panic. "Well, hello there, little fellow," Dr. Evans murmured, her voice gentle. She didn't reach out immediately, just observed. "Sarah mentioned your unique situation. Rocket, is it? That's a strong name." She slowly extended a hand, letting Rocket sniff her fingers. He recoiled slightly, but didn't hiss. Progress. The examination was thorough. Dr. Evans palpated his spine, checked his reflexes, expressed his bladder with clinical expertise while Sarah held him steady, murmuring reassurances he probably couldn't hear over his own fear. She measured his muscle mass, examined his healed skin. She watched, fascinated, as Rocket, momentarily distracted by a pen light, gave a small, frustrated hop on the table to reposition himself. Remarkable adaptation, Dr. Evans noted, jotting something down. His core strength is exceptional. Front leg development is superb. He's clearly compensating incredibly well. She looked at Sarah, her expression turning serious. Medically, he's surprisingly robust. Good weight, healthy organs considering. But Sarah's heart sank. There was always a but his mobility, this hopping, it's putting tremendous strain on his spine, his shoulders. Dr. Evans continued, her tone gentle but firm. Cats are built for 4-point locomotion. The impact of landing solely on his front legs, the torque on his spine with every hop, it's unsustainable long term. He's young and strong now, but arthritis, disc problems, chronic pain. It's almost inevitable down the line. The words landed like physical blows. The joy Sarah had felt watching Rocket conquer the armchair curdled into cold fear. What can we do? She asked, her voice tight. Dr. Evans sighed. Wheeled carts aren't ideal for cats with his specific anatomy. They often cause chafing. The best thing, realistically, is to severely limit his jumping. Keep him confined to low surfaces. Ramps might help for essential access, but high jumps, furniture hopping. It needs to stop. For his own good, stop. Sarah looked down at Rocket, who had finally stopped trembling and was now staring fixedly at the closed door of the examination room, his body tense with the desire to escape. Confine him, after he'd fought so hard for every inch of freedom, after he'd shown her what defiance looked like, it felt like a betrayal. Like clipping the wings of a bird that had just learned to fly against all odds. The drive home was silent. Rocket huddled in his carrier, subdued. Sarah's mind raced. Dr. Evans' words echoed, clashing violently with the image of Rocket soaring onto the sunlit chair, the pure triumph in his eyes. For his own good, was it, or was it imposing human limitations on a spirit that refused to acknowledge them? Back in the apartment, Rocket emerged from his carrier and immediately scoot-hopped towards the living room. Sarah watched him, her heart heavy. He paused at the foot of the sofa, the same sofa he'd watched her from for weeks. He looked up at the seat, then back at Sarah. His copper eyes held a question, a challenge. I don't know, Rocket, she whispered, the conflict tearing at her. I don't know what's right. He held her gaze for a long moment. Then, with a decisive grunt, he backed up, coiled, and leapt. Not as high as onto the armchair, but a clean, powerful hop that landed his front paws squarely on the sofa cushion. He scrabbled, heaved, and pulled himself up. He turned, sat down primly on the edge, and looked down at her, his tail, or where a tail would be held high in a gesture of pure, unadulterated feline satisfaction. The message was clear. This is my life. I decide. The tension within Sarah tightened. Protect him from future pain, or honor the vibrant, determined life he was living now. It was an impossible choice, and then a new mystery began, subtle at first, easy to dismiss. Rocket started staring at the wall, not just any wall. The shared wall between Sarah's apartment and the vacant one next door. It was in the living room, near the corner where her stacked canvases gathered dust. He'd be sitting on the sofa or on his favorite rug, and his gaze would drift, fixating on a seemingly random spot about 4 feet up the beige-painted drywall. He'd sit utterly still, his copper eyes wide and unblinking, ears pricked forward, not the relaxed stare of a daydreaming cat. This was intense, focused, almost listening. Sarah noticed it one evening. Rocket, what is it, buddy? She followed his gaze. Just a wall. Smooth, blank, silent. She tapped it gently. Nothing there, silly. He didn't react to her voice or the tap. His stare remained locked. After a minute or two, he'd blink, slowly shake his head as if clearing it, and go back to grooming or watching the window. Then it started happening at night. Sarah, struggling with insomnia, would wander into the living room for water. In the dim light filtering from the street lamp outside, she'd see him sitting bolt upright in the middle of the rug, facing the wall, motionless. A small, ginger sentinel fixated on the blank surface. It was eerie, unsettling. Rocket. She'd whisper, turning on a small lamp. The light would break his trance. He'd startle, look at her, then quickly look away, almost sheepishly, before hopping off to his bed in the spare room. He wouldn't purr when she picked him up on these nights. His body felt tense. Alert. Is he hearing something? Sarah pressed her ear to the wall. Silence. The apartment next door had been empty for months. Rats in the walls, but the building was solid, and she heard no scratching. Is it pain? Dr. Evans's warning echoed. Was this a sign of the strain? Some neurological oddity? She researched. Cats staring at walls. The results ranged from the mundane flies, dust motes, to the unsettling cognitive decline, hallucinations. Nothing felt right. Rocket was young, sharp, engaged. Except for these moments, the staring sessions grew longer, more frequent. Sometimes he'd let out a low, questioning chirp directed at the wall. Other times, a soft, distressed mew that made Sarah's skin prickle. It felt like he was trying to communicate with the plaster, trying to understand something invisible to her. The conflict with the vet's advice merged with this new, strange behavior. Fear coiled tighter in Sarah's gut. Fear for Rocket's physical future. Fear of some unseen ailment causing this obsession. Fear of the unknown lurking behind that blank wall. The warmth and peace of their shared recovery felt fragile, threatened by practical warnings and inexplicable mysteries. One rainy night, the tension reached a peak. Sarah woke to the sound of movement, not the usual scrape of Rocket's hops. This was a frantic, scrambling sound. She rushed into the living room. Rocket was at the wall, not sitting. He was up on his powerful front legs, his body vertical, pressed against the beige surface. He was reaching up with one paw, claws extended, scratching desperately at the spot he always stared at. Scritch, 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 a rapid, insistent rhythm. His eyes were wide, frantic. He let out a sharp, high-pitched yowl unlike anything she'd ever heard from him. A sound of pure distress, almost terror. Rocket. No, stop. Sarah rushed forward, scooping him up. He struggled in her arms, twisting to look back at the wall, letting out another piercing yowl. His heart was hammering against her palm. She held him close, rocking him, shushing him. It's okay. Shh, what is it? What's wrong? He trembled violently in her arms, his gaze darting back to the wall, his small body radiating panic. The blank expanse of beige seemed to mock them both. What was he seeing? What was he hearing? What terrible thing existed in that spot, visible only to a determined, two-legged cat? The wall held its silence, keeping its secret. Sarah held her trembling cat, the rain lashing the windows, the vet's warnings about limitations echoing in her mind, and felt utterly lost. The peaceful corner they'd built felt paper thin. Something was wrong, deeply, inexplicably wrong. And Rocket, her brave little leaper, was desperately trying to tell her. The echo of Rocket's terrified yowl hung in the air long after his trembling subsided. Sarah held him on the worn living room rug, rain streaking the windows like tears on glass. She rocked him, whispering nonsense reassurances into his fur, her own heart pounding against his small, frantic one. The blank wall loomed, silent and accusing. What phantom haunted him there? What invisible terror could reduce her brave, leaping warrior to this shuddering ball of fear? For days, the apartment became a tense vigil. Rocket avoided the living room during daylight hours, retreating to the spare room's familiar shadows. He ate, but without his usual gusto. His playful hops were replaced by a cautious, almost defeated scooting. The spark in his copper eyes had dimmed, replaced by a watchful wariness that broke Sarah's heart. The vet's warnings about limiting. His movement now felt like a cruel joke. How could she confine him further when he was already imprisoning himself out of fear? The staring stopped. That was almost worse. It felt like resignation, like whatever he'd been trying to confront or understand had won. Sarah found herself staring at the spot instead, for feet up near the dusty canvases, just smooth, beige drywall. She pressed her ear against it again and again. Silence. She tapped, listened, knocked. Nothing. She researched obsessively. Ultrasonic sounds, pests, structural settling. Nothing fit. The building's superintendent, a weary man named Frank, dismissed her concerns with a shrug. Old building, lady, makes noises, cats are weird. Probably heard a mouse 6 apartments over, but Sarah knew this wasn't random. This was specific, targeted terror emanating from a single, unremarkable point. The conflict within her raged. Dr. Evans's voice. The strain, arthritis, chronic pain, limit the jumping, Rocket's silent suffering, the flattened ears. The refusal to enter the room, the loss of his joyful propulsion. Protecting his body meant crushing his spirit. Honoring his spirit might destroy his body. And layered beneath it all, the chilling mystery of the wall. Was it connected? Was this distress a symptom of the physical strain the vet feared? A neurological glitch caused by the unnatural stress on his spine. The thought sent icy dread through her veins. Had her awe at his leaps, her silent encouragement, damaged him. One gray afternoon, the tension snapped. Sarah sat on the floor of the spare room, sketching Rocket as he listlessly groomed a front paw. The lines on the paper were heavy, dark, reflecting the weight in the room. In her mind, she saw him soaring. Onto the chair, sunlight catching his ginger fur, his purr a triumphant rumble. Then she saw him pressed against the wall, claws scraping, yowling in primal terror. The images collided, shattering her resolve. I can't do this, she whispered, the pencil slipping from her fingers. Tears, hot and sudden, blurred her vision. Not just for Rocket, but for the crushing helplessness, the echoing grief for her father, the feeling of failing this fragile life entrusted to her. I don't know how to fix it. I don't know how to help you. Her shoulders slumped, the weight of months of sorrow and weeks of new fear finally buckling her. She buried her face in her hands, a sob wrenching itself from her chest. The sound was raw, ugly, echoing the despair she'd kept locked away. The soft scrape broke through her tears. She looked up, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. Rocket had stopped grooming. He was looking at her, his head tilted slightly. His copper eyes held no judgment, only a deep, quiet watchfulness. He took a slow, deliberate hop towards her. Then another. He stopped just inches from her bent knees. He didn't try to climb into her lap. He didn't nudge her hand. He simply sat down on the floor, facing her, his smooth back end resting comfortably. He held her watery gaze and slowly, deliberately, closed his eyes, a long, languid blink, holding it, then opening them again. I am here. You are not alone, Dot. It was the same gesture he'd given her weeks ago in the junk room, a fragile offering of trust. Now, it felt like an anchor, a lifeline thrown across a stormy sea of doubt. He wasn't asking for solutions, he was offering presence, shared vulnerability. I don't know who needs to hear this, but if you're listening alone tonight, know I made this story for you. Subscribe if you want more comfort like this. The raw simplicity of it cut through Sarah's despair. This creature, who had every reason to retreat into his own fear, was choosing connection. He mirrored her brokenness, yes, but he also mirrored the stubborn ember of resilience she was struggling to find. Her father's face flashed in her mind, not sick, not gone, but smiling, whistling off-key, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Don't fuss, Sarah girl. You figure it out. Rocket wasn't broken. He was adapting, and he needed her to adapt too. Not to cage him, but to believe him, to fight for his peace as fiercely as he fought for his leaps." The decision crystallized. With terrifying clarity, she couldn't ignore the wall. She couldn't dismiss his terror as imagination. If investigating meant potentially causing minor damage, so be it. If it meant facing the unknown, she would, for him. Because he had crossed the floor for her, gathering Rocket carefully, she carried him into the living room, his body tensed. Immediately, as they neared the dreaded wall, a low growl starting in his chest. "It's okay," she murmured, setting him down gently on the sofa, well away from the spot, but within sight. "Just wait. Let me see." She grabbed a small, sharp utility knife from a kitchen drawer, her hands surprisingly steady now. Resolve had replaced despair. She stood before the beige expanse. For feet up, the spot Rocket had fixated on, scratched at. Taking a deep breath, she pressed the knife point into the drywall. It gave way with a soft crunch. She made a small, vertical incision, about 2 inches long. Plaster dust puffed out, smelling chalky and ancient. She wiggled the blade, enlarging the hole slightly. Peering inside, all she saw was darkness and the vertical wooden stud. Nothing unusual. No wires, no pipes, no nests. Disappointment warred with relief. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe Frank was right. Then Rocket yelled, not the frantic terror of before, but a sharp, insistent cry from the sofa. He wasn't looking at the hole. He was staring fixedly beside it, about 6 inches to the left. His whole body was rigid, ears flat, pupils dilated. Sarah frowned. She pressed her eye closer to the small hole, angling her head. Still nothing? Frustration bubbled. Was it a sound only he could hear? Was she just humiliating herself by vandalizing her own wall? She pulled back, ready to give up, when her gaze fell on the stack of canvases leaning against the wall right next to the spot Rocket was now fixating on. Canvases she hadn't touched in months. Canvases wrapped in cheap plastic sheeting. A memory slammed into her, vivid and unexpected. Her father visiting this apartment shortly after she moved in. He'd helped her hang a heavy mirror in the spare room. "Gotta find the stud, Sarah girl," he'd said, knocking on the walls. Drywall's useless for holding weight. You find the stud, you find the strength. He'd shown her how the sound changed, how it felt more solid. She'd wrapped these canvases later, stacking them haphazardly, right here. With trembling hands, Sarah pushed the canvases aside. The wall behind them was identical, beige, smooth, unremarkable, except Rocket's intense stare was now laser-focused on a point directly behind where the largest canvas had leaned. She knocked gently. The sound was subtly different, less hollow, more solid. Like wood, not just plaster and air. Her pulse hammered in her throat. She raised the knife again. This time, she pressed the point into the wall precisely where Rocket was staring. Crunch. She made another small incision. Plaster dust. She widened it slightly, peering into the gloom. Something glinted. Not metal, not wire. Something smooth, off-white, curved. She carefully hooked a finger into the hole, feeling around the edges. It was paper. Thick, textured paper. She pulled gently. It resisted, then slid free with a soft rasp. It was a photograph, slightly bent, coated in a fine layer of plaster dust. Sarah wiped it clean on her sweater, her breath catching. It was her father, younger, maybe in his 40s. Standing on a rocky shoreline Sarah recognized instantly, their favorite vacation spot in Maine. He wasn't looking at the camera. He was looking slightly down, a wide, unreserved smile lighting his face, and cradled in his arms, held with Such obvious tenderness, it made Sarah's eyes burn. Was a small, fluffy ginger kitten? The kitten was batting playfully at the collar of his flannel shirt. The late afternoon sun painted everything in gold dots. Sarah sank to her knees, the photo clutched in her hand. She remembered that trip. Vaguely, she'd been a moody teenager, barely glancing at the stupid stray he'd found tangled in fishing line near the docks. She'd rolled her eyes as he fed it scraps, fussed over its sore paw. She hadn't paid attention. She certainly hadn't known he'd taken a picture. How had it gotten inside the wall? A soft thump pulled her gaze. Rocket had hopped down from the sofa. He scooted across the rug towards her, not with fear, but with deliberate purpose. He stopped beside her knees, his copper eyes fixed not on the hole in the wall, but on the photograph in her hand. He looked at the image of the ginger kitten. Then, slowly, deliberately, he lifted his gaze to Sarah's face. He didn't blink slowly this time. He just looked deeply, intently, as if seeing her, truly seeing her for the first time. The connection slammed into her with the force of a physical blow. Rocket hadn't been sensing a pest, or a sound, or neurological pain. He'd been sensing this, a hidden fragment of love. A moment of pure, unguarded tenderness trapped behind plaster. A resonance, the ginger kitten in the photo, the determined ginger survivor beside her, her father's smile, her own buried grief. It wasn't horror in the wall, it was memory. It was love, walled up and forgotten, vibrating at a frequency only this extraordinary, broken, intuitive creature could perceive. He hadn't been scratching in terror, he'd been scratching to free it. To show her, a sob tore from Sarah's throat, but it was different this time, not despair, not helplessness. It was release, profound, shattering release. The dam holding back her grief broke. Tears streamed down her face, hot and endless, washing away the plaster dust, the fear, the months of frozen sorrow. She curled over the photograph, her shoulders shaking, the sounds raw and guttural echoing in the quiet room. She cried for her father, for the moments missed, for the love he gave so freely, even to a stray kitten, for the love she'd been too wrapped up in her own teenage angst to fully see, for the incredible, impossible cat who had somehow sensed a ghost of that love trapped in the bones of her apartment and refused to let it stay hidden. She felt warmth against her leg. Rocket had pressed his side against her, his head resting gently on her knee. He didn't purr, he didn't move. He simply offered his solid, living presence. A silent witness to her unraveling, a small, powerful gesture that said, "I am here. Feel this. It's okay." Sarah reached down, her tear-streaked fingers sinking into the soft fur behind his ears. He leaned into the touch, closing his eyes. She held the photograph in one hand, Rocket's warm head under the other, the hole in. The wall a small, insignificant wound compared to the vast, healing fissure opening in her heart. The pieces crashed together. Her father's love for a lost kitten, Rocket's impossible journey to her junk room, his fierce leaps, his desperate scratching, this photograph hidden for years. It wasn't coincidence. It was a thread pulled taut through time and loss, connecting them all. In that raw, tear-soaked moment on the living room floor, Sarah understood. Rocket wasn't just teaching her about resilience. He was showing her that love, even love lost, never truly disappears. It echoes. It lingers in the walls, in the memories, in the determined spirit of a two-legged cat who wouldn't stop scratching until it was found. The doubters about Rocket, about her grief, about second chances, hadn't just been proven wrong about a jump. They'd been proven wrong about everything. The most profound leaps weren't always physical. Sometimes they were straight into the heart of the pain to find the love waiting on the other side. She held the proof in her hands, warm and purring against her leg. The ice wasn't just cracked anymore. It was flooding, warm and healing, carrying her back to shore. The raw, cleansing storm of tears left Sarah hollowed out, but lighter. as if the weight of unshed grief, compacted over months, had finally been excavated. She sat on the living room floor for a long time, the photograph of her father and the ginger kitten resting in her lap, Rocket a warm, grounding pressure against her thigh. The hole in the wall was a jagged, plaster-dusted eye staring back at her, but it felt insignificant now. A necessary wound. The silence in the apartment wasn't the heavy silence of absence anymore. It was the deep, resonant quiet after a long-awaited rain. A quiet filled with presence, the soft rhythm of Rocket's breathing, the echo of her father's smile in the faded photo, and the thrumming awareness of a connection that defied logic and loss. Life moved forward, irrevocably changed. The sharp edges of Sarah's grief didn't vanish, but they softened, blurred by the warmth emanating from the small, determined creature beside her and the rediscovered memory in her hands. She carefully framed the photograph and placed it on the small bookshelf near the sofa, not hidden away, but visible. A daily reminder of tenderness, of unexpected connections, of the love that lingers. Rocket's behavior shifted subtly, too. The frantic, terrified scratching at the wall ceased completely. He still occasionally glanced at the spot, but now it was a look of quiet recognition, perhaps even satisfaction, before his gaze would drift to the window or Sarah or his food bowl. The oppressive fear that had gripped him dissipated like fog under a strengthening sun. He began venturing back into the living room during the day, reclaiming his favorite sunbeam on the rug. His appetite returned, hearty and appreciative, but the ghost of Dr. Evans's warning remained. Sarah couldn't unhear the words, the strain. Arthritis, chronic pain, it's almost inevitable. Watching Rocket now, hopping onto the sofa cushion with a powerful thrust of his front legs and a controlled landing, she saw it differently. She saw the focused tension in his shoulders, the slight grunt of effort. She saw the potential cost of his breathtaking freedom. The impossible choice hadn't vanished. It had merely transformed. Protecting his body meant protecting his spirit. But protecting his spirit meant allowing him to live the life he fought for. Confinement wasn't the answer. Rocket had proven that beyond doubt. But neither was reckless abandon. Sarah realized the answer lay not in prohibition, but in adaptation. Just as Rocket had adapted his body, she needed to adapt his environment. She became an architect of accessibility. She built low, sturdy ramps covered in soft carpet leading up to the sofa and the armchair, gentle inclines that allowed Rocket to walk up, conserving the explosive energy of his jumps for moments of pure choice, not necessity. She cleared lower surfaces, sturdy ottomans, wide windowsills, creating a network of accessible perches where he could survey his kingdom without straining. She invested in thick, plush rugs scattered strategically to cushion his landings. It wasn't about stopping the leaps, it was about making them safer, sustainable. Rocket, ever the pragmatist, approved. He tested the ramps cautiously at first, his powerful front legs easily propelling him upward with less strain. He quickly claimed the lower windowsill as his new observation post, spending hours watching the world below, pigeons squabbling, leaves swirling, people rushing past. The triumphant hops onto the sofa still happened, but less frequently. They became deliberate acts of joy, of capability asserted, rather than the only means of access. Sarah would watch him, her heart clenching with a mixture of awe and protective anxiety, but also with profound respect. He knew his body. He calculated his efforts. He wasn't reckless. He was masterful. Every new subscriber is like a warm cup of tea to my soul. It keeps this little channel going. If you felt something from this story, I'd love for you to stay. Daily routines settled into a new, comforting rhythm, imbued with a quiet awareness. Mornings began not with the oppressive weight of loneliness, but with Rocket's soft, chirping trill as she opened the spare room door. He'd hop-scoot eagerly towards the kitchen, leading the way to breakfast. The sounds were familiar, the clink of his ceramic dish, the crunch of kibble, the rhythmic lapping of water, but they were no longer just sounds of survival. They were sounds of shared life, of companionship. Sarah started painting again. Tentatively at first, not the grand landscape she used to chase, but smaller studies. A sunbeam fracturing through the dusty living room window, illuminating motes of dust like tiny stars. The intricate pattern of shadows cast by the new ramps. The intense, focused curve of Rocket's back as he prepared for a hop. The warm, burnished copper of his eyes. She painted the photograph too, her father's tender smile, the fluffy ginger kitten, infusing the image with the warmth of memory now fully reclaimed. The colors felt different on her palette, fuller, richer, less about capturing external light, more about illuminating the light she was rediscovering within her own shadowed world. The act was no longer an escape, it was an expression, a testament. She took Rocket back to Dr. Evans. The atmosphere was different this time, less dread, more shared purpose. Sarah explained the adaptations, the ramps, the cushioned landings, the monitored leaps. She showed her a video on her phone of Rocket, deliberately choosing to use the ramp versus executing a controlled, powerful hop onto a low ottoman. Dr. Evans watched, her expression shifting from professional reserve to genuine surprise and admiration. "Well," she said finally, a small smile touching her lips as Rocket sat calmly on the examination table, accepting a gentle ear scratch. "I have to admit, Sarah, this is remarkable. Both of you." She examined his shoulders, his spine, palpating with careful fingers. "The muscle development is excellent. No signs of undue strain or inflammation yet. Your approach, it's smart, thoughtful. You're respecting his spirit while protecting his body. It's a delicate balance, but you're navigating it beautifully." She looked at Rocket, then back at Sarah. "Keep monitoring, watch for any signs of stiffness or reluctance, but for now, keep doing exactly what you're doing. He's thriving." The relief that washed over Sarah was profound. It wasn't absolution from future challenges, but validation. They were doing it right, together, honoring his strength, mitigating the risks, living fully in the present tense. One soft spring afternoon, Sarah sat on the sofa sketching Rocket, as he dozed in a patch of sunlight on the rug. The air drifting through the open window carried the scent of damp earth and the first tentative blossoms. It was a world away from the biting October wind when he'd first dragged himself into her life. She looked at him. The sleek ginger fur, the powerful shoulders, the smooth curve where his hindquarters ended, the utter peace in his sleeping face. He wasn't a creature defined by lack. He was defined by abundance, of spirit, of resilience, of an uncanny ability to find and free hidden love. She thought of the wall. The hole had been patched, sanded, painted over. A faint scar remained, visible only if you knew where to look, like the scar on her own heart. Not erased, but integrated, part of their story. The mystery was solved, the terror dispelled, leaving only the quiet resonance of a love that had transcended plaster and time. Life wasn't perfect. The ache for her father still surfaced, sharp and sudden sometimes. Worries about Rocket's future mobility still whispered in the back of her mind. But the paralyzing grief, the suffocating isolation, the feeling of being fundamentally broken, those were receding, replaced by a quiet strength, a deep gratitude, and a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. Rocket hadn't just entered her life, he had rearranged it. He had shown her that healing wasn't about forgetting, but about integrating. That strength wasn't the absence of weakness, but the courage to move forward despite it. That love, once given, never truly dies. It waits, sometimes hidden in plain sight, for someone brave enough or intuitive enough to set it free. She closed her sketchbook, the soft thump echoing Rocket's gentle hops. He stirred, blinking open his copper eyes, stretching his front legs with a luxurious groan. He looked at her, gave a slow, deliberate blink. "I am here. You are here. All is well." Sarah smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile that reached her eyes. The October chill felt like a distant memory. Outside, a sparrow chirped on the windowsill. Inside, the quiet hum of their shared world was a peaceful, perfect melody. The corner they had built together, once so fragile, felt solid now, anchored in love, resilience, and the quiet, ongoing miracle of a cat who leapt not just across furniture, but straight into the heart of what it meant to heal. The journey wasn't over, but the path ahead felt clear, bathed in the gentle light of a spring that had finally, stubbornly broken through. The peace they'd forged felt deep, solid, a quiet harbor after a long storm. Spring deepened, painting the city in hopeful greens and shy blossoms. Sarah's days unfolded with a gentle rhythm built around Rocket's needs and her rediscovered art. The ramps were worn smooth by his constant use. The plush rugs bore the faint indentations of his landings. The framed photograph of her father and the ginger kitten watched over them, a silent testament to the invisible threads that bind hearts across time and circumstance. Sarah's paintings, once confined to a cheap notebook, now filled canvases stacked against the living room wall where the mystery had lurked. They were studies in resilience, in quiet joy, in the extraordinary ordinary. A close-up of Rocket's powerful front paw, pads slightly rough, claws retracted, but ready. The intense, focused copper of his eye, capturing a universe of determination. Sunlight dappling his ginger fur as he slept, a study in earned peace. And the photograph, lovingly rendered in oils, her father's tender smile, the playful kitten, the golden mane light, now imbued with layers of understanding Sarah hadn't possessed before, one evening as she added finishing touches to a painting of Rocket mid-hop, suspended in that impossible moment of airborne grace, her phone buzzed. It was Clara, the owner of the small, quirky coffee shop downtown where Sarah sometimes sketched. Clara had seen Sarah's notebook months ago and had been gently encouraging ever since. Sarah. Hi, listen, that space I mentioned, the little alcove wall, it's finally free next month. Still interested in hanging a few pieces? Sarah's breath hitched, showing her work, putting these intimate portraits of her grief, her healing, her two-legged miracle out into the world. It felt terrifying, like exposing a raw nerve. Rocket, sensing her sudden spike of anxiety, hopped from his windowsill perch and scooted over, pressing his side firmly against her ankle. His low, rumbling purr vibrated up her leg. I am here. You can do this. I don't know, Clara, Sarah stammered, looking down at Rocket's steady gaze. They're personal. All the best art is, honey, Clara replied warmly. That's what makes it sing. Just think about it. No pressure. She paused. People need to see beauty in unexpected places, Sarah, especially now. The words echoed long after Clara hung up. Beauty in unexpected places. Rocket, dragging himself across a dusty floor. Rocket, soaring onto a sunlit chair. Rocket, sensing love trapped in a wall. Wasn't that the heart of it? Her paintings weren't just about a cat. They were about the defiant spark of life that flickers even in the broken places, about finding connection in the wreckage, about the quiet, breathtaking courage of simply persisting. With Rocket curled beside her on the sofa that night, his rhythmic breathing a calming counterpoint to her racing thoughts, Sarah made the decision. She would do it, not for fame, not for money, but because Clara was right. People did need to see, and maybe, just maybe, sharing Rocket's light could help illuminate someone else's darkness, the way he had illuminated hers. The weeks leading up to the exhibition were a flurry of nervous energy. Choosing the pieces, framing them simply, letting the images speak. Writing brief, heartfelt descriptions. Rocket's leap, defying gravity and expectation. Earned rest, peace after the storm, echoes of love found. Rocket supervised it all from various perches, his calm presence a constant anchor amidst Sarah's fluttering anxiety. He seemed to understand this was important, offering slow blinks of encouragement and nudging her hand with his head when her nerves threatened to overwhelm. The night of the opening arrived, crisp and clear. Sarah felt physically ill as she arranged the final painting, the large, vibrant rendering of the photograph, on the alcove wall of Clara's bustling coffee shop. The space was warm, smelling of roasted beans and cinnamon, filled with the lo-hum of conversation and clinking cups. Her paintings looked small, vulnerable, exposed under the soft track lighting. Doubt roared in her ears. Who cares about paintings of a disabled cat? This is self-indulgent. A mistake. Every new subscriber is like a warm cup of tea to my soul. It keeps this little channel going. If you felt something from this story, I'd love for you to stay. She lingered near the back, near the espresso machine, trying to disappear. Rocket was safely at home, the apartment filled with his favorite toys and an extra helping of tuna. She felt untethered without his grounding presence. People milled. They sipped coffee. They glanced at the paintings. Some paused. Some moved on. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. Then she noticed a woman, perhaps in her 60s, standing, very still in front of echoes of love found. The woman's gaze wasn't casual. It was intense, almost hungry. She leaned closer, her fingers tracing the edge of the frame, not touching the glass, but hovering near her father's smiling face, near the fluffy ginger kitten. Sarah saw the woman's shoulders tremble slightly, saw her quickly wipe a tear from her cheek with the back of her hand. Sarah's own breath caught. She shouldn't intrude, but something compelled her forward. She approached slowly, stopping a respectful distance away. That one, it means a lot to me, she offered. Softly, her voice barely audible over the coffee shop murmur, the woman turned. Her eyes, a faded blue, were red-rimmed but held a depth of emotion that silenced Sarah's awkwardness. It's remarkable, the woman whispered, her voice thick. She pointed a slightly shaking finger not at her father, but at the kitten, the expression, the sheer life in this little creature. It's exactly how I remember her. Sarah frowned slightly. Her, the woman nodded, a sad, tender smile touching her lips. My Maisie, she was a little ginger scrap too. Found her half drowned in a storm drain when my Ben was just a boy. She looked back at the painting, her gaze softening. She only had 3 legs, lost one before I found her. But goodness, the spirit in her. She chuckled softly, a watery sound. She could climb anything. Taught my Ben more about resilience than any book ever could. Lived 16 fierce, wonderful years. She touched her chest, just over her heart. Seeing this, it brings her right back. That same fire, that same indomitable spark. Sarah stared at her, stunned. The connection wasn't about the photograph itself. It was about the spirit captured within it. The spirit Rocket echoed, the spirit this woman recognized. Instantly in her own lost Maisie, it was a resonance Sarah hadn't anticipated. Her painting hadn't just depicted her own story. It had become a mirror for someone else's cherished memory, their own story of love and resilience embodied in a differently abled creature. This cat, the woman continued, gesturing towards the other paintings of Rocket, leaping, sleeping, gazing intently. He's yours. Yes, Sarah breathed, emotion swelling in her throat. His name is Rocket. He only has 2 legs. The woman's eyes widened slightly, then filled with pure, unadulterated admiration. 2 legs. She looked back at the painting of the leap, studying the powerful shoulders, the focused intensity. Goodness, look at him fly. She turned, fully to Sarah, placing a gentle hand on her arm. You've captured something truly special, dear. Not just his form, but his soul. His magnificent spirit. Thank you for sharing him. Thank you for reminding me of mine. The woman, whose name was Eleanor, stayed for a long time. They talked. Not just about cats, but about loss, about finding unexpected strength, about the quiet heroes who enter our lives on fewer legs but leave the deepest footprints. Other people drifted over, drawn by the intensity of their quiet conversation, by the paintings that suddenly seemed to pulse with deeper meaning. A young man in a wheelchair paused before Rocket's leap, his gaze thoughtful, intense. A woman holding the hand of a child with leg braces knelt down, pointing at the painting of Rocket sleeping peacefully. See, sweetie, he rests when he needs to. And then he jumps. Sarah watched, her earlier anxiety dissolving into a profound, humbling awe. This was Rocket's final gift, not just to her, but through her. Her paintings, born from her own brokenness, and Rocket's fierce light weren't just art on a wall, they were conduits. They were silent stories whispering to other wounded hearts, "You are not alone. Look at this. Look what's possible. Look at this leap of faith, this leap of spirit." Rocket's impact wasn't confined to her apartment. His story, his image, was becoming a quiet beacon, a shared language of resilience that transcended words. Driving home later, the city lights blurring past the car windows, Sarah felt a different kind of quiet settle over her. It was the quiet of deep fulfillment, of purpose realized. She walked into the apartment, the familiar scent of home, faintly of plaster dust, Rocket's fur, linseed oil wrapping around her like a comforting blanket. Rocket greeted her with an insistent murrow and a demanding head butt against her shin, clearly wanting his delayed dinner, and an update dot as she scooped his food. She looked at him, this small, ginger engine of transformation. He wasn't just her rescue, he was her teacher, her mirror, her unexpected muse. He had leapt into her life, shattered her frozen grief, unearthed hidden love, and now, through the simple, powerful act of being seen, of his spirit being captured and shared, he was leaping into the hearts of others. His greatest feat wasn't conquering furniture. It was bridging the silent spaces between lonely souls, proving that courage, in whatever form it takes, is a universal language. The final piece clicked into place. Rocket's story wasn't just about adaptation. It was about connection, radiating outward like ripples from a stone thrown into the still waters of a world that desperately needed his light. The gift wasn't the exhibition, it was the undeniable proof that his two-legged journey had created pathways for others to find their own way home. The city outside Sarah's window cycled through seasons, the exuberant green of summer deepening, then fading into the fiery blaze of autumn, mirroring the journey within the small apartment. The echo of the coffee shop exhibition lingered, not as a clamorous applause, but as a soft, persistent hum. Cards arrived, tucked into Clara's care, simple notes on plain paper. "Your Rocket painting hangs above my desk." On hard days, I look at him and remember to leap. Another, "My son has CP. He saw Rocket jump and said, 'He's like me.' Mom, he finds his own way up. Thank you." A photograph arrived from Eleanor, a faded Polaroid of a grinning young boy. Ben, holding a ginger cat with 3 legs. Maisie, her eyes bright with the same fierce sparks Sarah saw in Rocket every day. These weren't fame, they were threads. Delicate, unexpected threads connecting Sarah and Rocket's quiet corner of resilience to other quiet corners, other stories of adaptation, loss, and the stubborn refusal to be defined by what was missing. Rocket, blissfully unaware of his burgeoning legacy, continued his daily routines with the focused dedication of a tiny, furry CEO. The ramps were his highways, the low windowsills his observation decks, the plush rugs his landing pads. His hops onto the sofa or the armchair remained deliberate acts of triumph, executed with a powerful economy of movement that never failed to fill Sarah with awe and a protective pang. He was a master of his body, a testament to the extraordinary plasticity of life when met with an unyielding spirit. Sarah's art deepened. The paintings became less about documenting Rocket's physical feats and more about capturing the essence of his presence, the quiet intensity of his watchful gaze, the profound peace in his sleep, the subtle shift in his posture that signaled pure contentment. She painted the threads too. Abstract pieces hinting at interconnectedness, webs of light connecting disparate points, echoes of ginger fur and determined spirits across time and space. She painted the feeling of Eleanor's hand on her arm, the recognition in Ben's young eyes looking at Maisie. She painted the quiet hum of shared understanding that now vibrated beneath the surface of her days. Her studio corner, once a place of blocked frustration, now thrummed with purpose, smelling of linseed oil, turpentine, and the faint, comforting scent of cat that always seemed to linger on Rocket's chosen cushion nearby. Life settled into a rhythm that was both profoundly ordinary and quietly miraculous. Mornings still began with Rocket's chirping trill and the purposeful scrape thump of his journey to the kitchen. Evenings often found Sarah sketching while Rocket dozed. In the last pool of sunset light, his rhythmic purr-grounding bass line to the city's distant symphony. The framed photograph of her father and the nameless ginger kitten remained a silent sentinel, a reminder of the hidden love that had started it all. The echo Rocket had somehow sensed and freed, the sharp, jagged edges of Sarah's grief for her father hadn't vanished, but they were now encased in something softer, warmer. Remembering him didn't always bring a crushing weight. Sometimes it brought a smile, a warmth, a whispered thanks Dad directed at the photograph, or the empty space he used to fill over the phone. She'd even called her ex-husband, not to rekindle, but to share a simple memory of her father fixing a leak under his sink. A story that made them both laugh, a small bridge built over the chasm of their past. Healing, she realized, wasn't a destination of perfect peace, but a landscape. There were still valleys of sadness, moments when the ache for her father's voice felt fresh and raw. But the peaks were higher now, offering breathtaking vistas of gratitude and connection she could never have imagined from the depths of that October despair. And Rocket was her constant companion on this terrain, a small, steady guide who asked for nothing but tuna and the freedom to leap, yet gave her back the world. If this gentle story brought even a tiny smile or calm to your heart, would you consider subscribing? It helps me keep sharing these soft moments for you and for anyone who needs peace tonight. She often found herself reflecting on the doubters. Not just the imagined ones in the vet's waiting room, but the internal voices, loudest of all, that had whispered impossible when she first saw him dragging himself across the floor. Impossible he'd survive. Impossible he'd bond. Impossible he'd jump. Impossible he could sense something hidden in a wall. Impossible his spirit could touch lives beyond their four walls. Rocket had systematically dismantled every single impossible, not with grand declarations, but with the quiet, relentless force of his being. He lived his truth, one determined hop, one slow blink, one resonant purr at a time. His existence was a silent, powerful rebuke to limitation, a testament to the breathtaking potential that blooms when life is met not with resignation, but with fierce, adaptable grace. His impact wasn't measured in viral views, though a short video Clara posted of Sarah painting while Rocket executed a perfect, controlled hop onto his cushion did garner quiet attention online. His impact was measured in the quiet tear wiped away by a stranger in a coffee shop, in the spark of recognition in a child's eyes facing his own challenges, in the way Sarah now looked at the world, not just at the brokenness, but at the astonishing, often hidden ways life stitches itself back together, stronger at the seams. He taught her that strength isn't the absence of vulnerability. It's the courage to be vulnerable and move forward anyway. That love isn't erased by loss. It transforms, echoes, and finds new vessels. that the most profound connections are often forged not in perfection, but in the shared language of mending. One crisp autumn afternoon, remarkably similar to the one when Rocket had first appeared, Sarah sat on the sofa, Rocket a warm weight, curled against her thigh, deeply asleep. Outside, leaves swirled in a gust of wind, performing their own final, beautiful dance before settling. The light was golden, slanting low, painting long, dramatic shadows across the room. Sarah wasn't sketching, she wasn't painting. She was simply being, feeling the solid warmth of Rocket beside her, listening to the soft sigh of his breath, watching the play of light and shadow on the wall where the mystery had once pulsed. The patched spot was invisible now, seamlessly absorbed, just another part of the wall's story. Just like the scars on her heart were part of hers, she thought of the ginger kitten in the photograph, its fate unknown. Had it lived a long life, cherished by her father? Had its spirit, in some unfathomable way, paved the path for Rocket to find her? She didn't know. Some mysteries, she realized, were meant to remain not as sources of fear, but as reminders of the vast, unseen tapestry of connection. Rocket stirred in his sleep, stretching his powerful front legs, a soft groan escaping him. He blinked open his copper eyes, hazy with sleep, and looked up at her. Slowly, deliberately, he closed them. A long, languid blink. I am here. You are safe. All is well. Sarah smiled, the warmth spreading through her chest as familiar and vital. As sunlight, she reached down, her fingers sinking into the impossibly soft fur behind his ears. He leaned into the touch, his purr rumbling to life, a deep, contented vibration that filled the quiet room. It was the sound of home, the sound of peace hard-won and deeply cherished. Looking at him, this small, two-legged miracle who had leapt into her broken world and taught her how to mend, Sarah understood the core truth of their story. It wasn't about overcoming disability. It was about embracing possibility. It wasn't about the absence of legs, but the presence of an indomitable spirit. Rocket's greatest leap wasn't onto furniture. It was into the hearts of everyone he touched, proving that the most extraordinary journeys often begin with a desperate drag across a dusty floor, guided only by an unwavering will to live, to connect, and to find the light waiting on the other side of the dark. He was a testament to the quiet, earth-shattering power of resilience, a furry philosopher teaching that love, in all its forms, is the most powerful force for healing, the most enduring bridge across any chasm, and the only thing truly capable of making the impossible beautifully, breathtakingly possible. The golden light deepened, painting Rocket's fur in hues of amber and flame. The city sounds faded into a gentle hum. In that quiet corner of the world, built on rescued trust, unearthed love, and the daily miracle of a cat who defied gravity and expectation simply by being, Sarah felt a profound sense of fullness. The journey hadn't erased the past. It had woven it into the fabric of a richer, more compassionate present. Rocket's soft purr was the lullaby of their shared peace, a promise that even in a world of uncertainty, some corners could be built to last, anchored in the simple, extraordinary act of choosing to leap again and again towards the light. And as long as that purr resonated, as long as those copper eyes held their quiet fire, Sarah knew the most important lesson of all, that sometimes the most profound healing comes on only two legs, wrapped in ginger fur and delivered with a purr that mends the world, one quiet heart at a time. You stayed till the end. Thank you. If it felt like a soft hug or a warm purr in your heart, subscribing lets me bring you more moments like this.